Hi, happy July 4th. Glad you took time out from your picnic to watch my video. Today what I'd like to do is to read the pertinent parts of the Declaration of Independence and talk a little bit about their historical background. As you know, it begins, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. A decent respect for the opinion of mankind. Nobody ever had that before. Nobody ever gave a damn what mankind thought. What mattered was the princes and the kings and the queens and the popes and the lords and the noblemen and the elite of each of these countries. The idea that there was such a thing as public opinion, or that it mattered, was a revolutionary concept, and it really was first articulated in the Declaration of Independence. The Magna Carta and these other things are rights that are listed, but nothing was an appeal to the conscience of the world. Nobody knew there was such a thing. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Now, self-evident really was an amazing thing. Here we're at a period where women were subjugated, where there was slavery all over the world. The entire rest of the world was divided into a class system. And for a new government to be predicated on the idea that it is self-evident that all are created equal was truly an extraordinary concept for him to articulate. And that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights from your Creator. Now, the previous theory of governance, of course, had been that the king was endowed by his Creator with all the powers, and he ruled by divine right of kings, and that the subjects were subject to his discipline, much as a father dominated a household and a family in those days. And there was no concept that the subjects had any rights. But here the concept is that the subjects had the rights, the citizens had the rights, and that those rights came directly from God, not from, and those rights did not flow from God to the king. And that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, the idea of an inherent right to life, the idea that liberty was an inalienable right, that men were free not because they were granted the freedoms by their sovereign, but because they were given those freedoms by God, and the pursuit of happiness. This is in an era in which nobody was happy. One writer once said that life in those times was nasty, brutish, and short. And to say that you had a pursuit of happiness was an incredible concept. Most people would just settle for being alive. And the idea that we had a right to pursue happiness was an extraordinary, original notion. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Well, the opposite theory of governance used to apply, articulated by Thomas Hobbes, which is that people were so desperate for protection against the Vikings, against other principalities, against criminals and marauders, that they formed into feudal villages, and that their goal was to be protected. And then these feudal villages formed into a nation and set up a government in order to protect them. But here what he's saying is that government is set up not just for physical protection, life, but also to protect liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And that the function of government is to protect liberty. And that's why the government is established. And it derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. So this was just totally revolutionary. It was not a top-up, divinely sanctioned king who existed to keep everybody safe from harm, but rather liberty that was given to people, an inalienable right to life, liberty, and to pursue happiness. And that to secure these powers, they instituted the government, and the government derived its power only from the consent of the governed. This was basically the John Locke theory from the Enlightenment, articulated in a political document, as opposed to the Hobbes theory, which relied on what he called a Leviathan, a strong man, a Superman to protect everybody. And then he goes on and he explains that the rights of people to alter and abolish their government. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government, laying the foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem likely to affect their safety and happiness, explicitly granting to people the right of revolution, the right of dramatic change, the right of altering their government. This thesis in the Declaration of Independence was so incredibly novel. There's probably never been anything like it. The Communist Manifesto was also novel, but it never really translated into a government and never really worked. But these theories, these ideas, are really a watershed in human history. They're comparable to the Ten Commandments, or if you're a Christian, to the Gospel. They really amounted to a sharp turn, a sharp breach in the history of the world, before these rights were articulated and morphed into a country, and afterwards. And if anyone doubts the exceptionalism of the United States, it was the first country based on these principles, and remains based on these principles to this day, constantly forcing ourselves to be truer and truer to them, granting rights to more and more people and equalizing those rights and making sure that they're observed, women's vote, black vote, and all that stuff. But it is an extraordinary comment that the United States is still founded on these ideas, and founded on them more purely than any other country in the world. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your 4th.